Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Carry on, everyone. So we left off looking at the verse which mentions brahmacharya, and brahmacharya is often misconstrued as that you abstinence from all the sense contacts. In fact, what it means is you're walking in the path of Brahman. Your focus is always directed on the awareness of the truth, the self. And so it's not a self-denial. It doesn't mean that you don't engage in all the things in the world. Quite the opposite, you'll be quite present to engage your engagements of what you need to pursue in terms of your vasanas. But your thoughts are always on the self. That's what it is. So you're actually, all your senses are well controlled. So you have an understanding of what you've actually got to do in life, what your goal sets are, how you've got to go step by step, what your end goal is just to get to the self. So under the topic ever steadfast yoga and meditation, you reach the Brahman, is what we're looking at. So this idea of the practice of brahmacharya doesn't mean celibacy. It means you have a self-control over whatever you pursue, control of the senses. You're pursuing a path of the middle path, neither too much nor too little. Whatever you've got to do, you've assessed it and you go and do it. Not too much, not too little. That's the tricky part. We tend to indulge or we tend to deprive ourselves. Equally is not useful to sort out those vasanas that we have. And that's what we've got to do while we're here. So, any question before we move on to 12:13? Tim.
I did propose a question to the class.
Okay. Sorry.
What you were just talking about. Brahmacharya is a difficult word to translate into English. And it's usually translated as celibacy, which usually has a limited meaning in English of not marrying, not to be married to another person. So the question was, as you've just proposed it, what is brahmacharya? What's a better explanation of brahmacharya, especially when one has a duty to exhaust one's vasanas?
So you have to go on your path of whatever you're doing in terms of the worldly activities, but you have, your senses are controlled. So you have a discipline and control over what you pursue. And you can do that because your thoughts are resting on the higher, the self. That's your focus. Hence, you're not actually, your objective to the contact that you are pursuing. So you're not actually engaging in those activities with a desire backing it. So that's what makes it as though you're not engaging. But you are very much in your physical body, your mind, intellect, you're very much engaging, but your thoughts are resting on something higher. So you're objective to it all, like a sakshi. And it's a consistent purpose just to get to the self. So you could have a discipline in a particular field of activity of a relative goal, but it will take you to that goal. Here the goal is the yoga to unite with the self. which makes a brahmacharya as walking in the path of the self. Always the thoughts are on the self. So that confusing aspect where it says celibacy, we generally think of it as one not marrying. There's nothing in the Shastras which say you should or shouldn't marry as you pursue a spiritual path. Quite the contrary, if you have vasanas which need partnership, companionship, relationship, you must have that so that you exhaust it, so that it doesn't interfere with your high goal. In fact, perfect partnership is two people pursuing a spiritual path so that they can bounce off each other, but it's only to get to the truth. It's nothing, it's not for one's own indulgences, to ride one down the values. It's always to raise one up in the values. So it's only to get to the truth. It's not, why is it celibacy? It's not pulling you down in the lower values. It's actually riding you up. So once you ride yourself up in certain values, you have little interest in values which perhaps are more indulgent or sensual, because your thoughts are on something bigger. They've been displaced for something bigger. So you have less of a need. So it's less of an imposition, but more of you've taken up something bigger, so you have less of a need or interest. You don't have those vasanas. So you can't impose this as many places, and people might think that you ought or do when you tread the spiritual path. It's a very natural state of progression. Self-control, discipline, thoughts on the higher, walking of path of truth. You can't impose that. And anybody imposes it, perhaps in, you see in different remits of culture and religion, certain things are imposed. But you can't do that. It's got to come from within. And once you do that, person who's got vasanas and is suppressing their vasanas to fulfill a rule, it won't wash. Somewhere it will come out. And that's why you often have things which go wrong in society, where systems are supposed to be trusted as such, because there's a different purview from one person to another of what it's about. It just means self-control, self-discipline, walking the path of Brahman. And as that may be the case, you're probably less likely to be grossly involved in that attachment of another person or people. You're objective, and you may well be married. You're objective, the whole thing. It's all for the spiritual pursuit, nothing more, nothing less. That's what makes the difference. In fact, you're able to be there for another person's or society more so, because you don't have that focus on an individual to cater to you only. Brahmacharya. It's all inclusive, not exclusive. That's what it means, in fact. But you can't impose it on anyone. Makes sense. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Carol. So I'm married to all 9 people in the class because we're all pursuing brahmacharya.
The eternal marriage for everything. Should examine the 6 reasons to get married in The Fall of the Human Intellect. Gives you 6 reasons why people marry. And if you've got any one of those traits, you should marry. Needs or traits. Verse 12.
सर्वत्वारनि संयम्य मनोहृदि निरुद्य च हृदन्याधायात्मनः प्राणम् आस्थितो योगधारणाम् ॐ इत्येकाक्षरं ब्रह्म व्याहरन् मामनुस्मरन् यः प्रयाति त्यजन् देहं स याति परमां गतिम्.
Babita, if you could read the verse. In fact, if you could read both verses, because both are generally done together. Taken together.
Okay. Verse 12. Having controlled all gates, having confined mind, okay, let's start again. Having controlled all gates, having confined the mind in the heart, having fixed his prana, life breath, in the head, established in yogic concentration. Shall I do the 13th as well? Reciting Brahman, the one syllable Om, remembering me, he who departs, leaving the body, attains the supreme goal.
Okay. So, having controlled all the gates of the senses, Sarva Durani. So all the stimuli from the outside world which enters you has got 5 gates, we call that, 5 entry points. So your eyes, you gain sight. So you've got eyes, nose, ear, taste, touch. There's different ways that stimuli can enter. We maybe when for our eyes, color and form, we may see a beautiful landscape. We may see something not so tasteful to look at. For the ears, we hear maybe really noisy rock music, or could be classical bhajans. But we take in that stimuli. Depending on what we want to entertain. For our nose, we may have a perfume which invokes something sensual, or some agarbatti, incenses, which invokes something spiritual. We may eat, taste rotting food, or we may eat sattvic food. Choice is always ours. Touch. You may feel the embrace of somebody or something. You may feel the material. So you've just got to understand yourself, that you're letting in, flooding in stimuli from the world through all of these gates. Having confined the mind in the heart, having fixed the prana, life breath in the head. So we often refer to the heart, or we refer to the heart, we say it sometimes as the heart of the matter, the heart of the mind, but we're in this context talking about our core personality, the heart of the personality, getting to the core issue. At the moment, if you think about it, your mind may be going from here to here. Whilst you're sitting in this classroom, it could have gone to what you've got to do next, something you've done yesterday. We're all looking as though we're here, but it could have gone 100 places. My mind, just as I got up, went to plug in the computer because I saw it was going to go off. So we would have lost you all. So our mind is constantly going everywhere, helter-skelter in our own passions and desires. But we're sitting here in one place looking at Lord Buddha, as though we're all concentrated, focusing on these higher values. So just see, it shows you the trickiness of the mind. Sometimes it may be we go to something physically, sometimes we go to something mentally, but that mind, the heart of the things, mind is part of a core personality, and the prana, the breath, the vital force that in the head, the intellect. So the prana is the last activity, that last thought he's referring to here. So the whole idea is to be objective. So when you've established that concentration, established in yogi, he puts it, so that you've gone through that uparati, that concentration, you've got to that dhyana, meditation. He's talking about that status of a person here. So the mind and intellect are concentrated and directed upon the self. It's very much there. So it's talking about that state of meditation, in a sense, that that's where it's at. In 13, he says, reciting Brahman, the one syllable Om. So Oms are often used as that syllable to represent the Brahman. You could use any other syllable, any other mantra in meditation, but we tend to use Om because it's got that element of being articulate and inarticulate, complete sound phenomenon. It's representative of the Brahman. In terms of spirit and matter, we know the 5 elements in terms of matter. So we're taking our mind from those elements. So we go from this gross to the subtle to focus our mind on something higher. And if you look at the different elements, space is considered a subtlest of elements. It's only seen by, or it's only contacted by one of the senses, in fact. Space is associated with sound, the ear. You can't really see space, as it were. You can't really feel space. You can't touch it, as it were. But sometimes in the space you can hear sound. So it's considered as the subtlest, then air, which is contacted by 2 sense organs, and then fire, which is often used as an element or an idol of worship, first seen element. So as you grossify, we make idols out of the more grosser aspects to take us to the ideal. That's the idea. So Om, we utilize that sound phenomenon to take us from that transient to that transcendental. The last element, in fact, is water. Gives taste. Without water, we don't have any taste. So that's gross in itself. Water, earth, the grossest, in fact. So why do we use a symbol? It's to take our mind, put it on a focus, an idol, to get to the ideal. We're not quite there on chapter 12 of Bhakti Yoga, but it starts very much with idol murti puja, idol worship. And slowly, as you evolve your mind and intellect and your vasanas are refined, you drop the idol. So there's no idol required. It's very much a worship in terms of your activities and then in terms of your dhyana yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga. It refines itself. So for the average person, doesn't really know what Akshara Brahman is, doesn't know that imperishable. would never have looked at this type of knowledge. So you use an idol to get to the ideal. And in this case, it's proposing we use Om because it has those qualities of articulate, inarticulate. The whole sound phenomenon is complete from throat to label. Om. So you use the whole sound phenomenon. It's also representative of the waking, dream, and deep sleep states of consciousness, which we have to transcend. So hence, articulate in that sense, inarticulate in sound, intonation, articulate in what it represents. So the idea is you're chanting the mantra Om, your intellect's awareing that sound and silence. Sound and silence. Out of the silence comes the sound and merges back into the silence. That's what's going on till you merge with the self. That's the end stages. When you're in a state of concentration, dhyana. So first uparati, concentration, dhyana, meditation, to transcend, to get to the self. So when he's talking about he who departs leaving the body attains that supreme goal, he's not talking about that physical death, because you can, in accordance to Vedanta, physically die but have lots of vasanas. So then the theory is that you are reincarnated with those vasanas. So the best thing is to do, check out that you're refining your perceptions, emotions, and thoughts, your vasanas now, because you're just going to carry them forward according to the theory. So you better get a grip on what you've got to do now. Here, what it's inferring is it's talking about the death of the ego. That little self, that I. Not physical death. The death of the ego means you reach self-realization. So you're not stuck in the world, you merge with the Brahman. So you're no longer that conditioned consciousness, but you become that pure consciousness. So the body, mind, and intellect are conditioned consciousness. They're relative, they perish, they have a perishable factor. The supreme goal of the self is beyond that, limitless, infinite. The only goal that we're, in terms of scriptural values, whether we can take it on board or not, but you're all here, so we all must be curious and interested to push ourselves on that self-enfoldment. The only goal is to get to that self in life. So humanity currently is gravitating everywhere else, but it's to pull back and look at what that universal principle goal is. Absolute goal to get to the self. Relatively, it's self-evolution. They're all synonymous, the product with happiness. Happiness, joy, contentment, all synonymous with bliss of self. That's why we might go after it. So it's not in this class, but at the end of chapter 18 in the next class, we'll follow it by Bhajagovindam, and Bhajagovindam also compiled by Adi Sankaracharya, 30 verses long, talks about, warns us about acquisition and enjoyment. that you're looking for your happiness there, but it's not quite there. You've got to look somewhere else. So let's read. Let's read.
These two verses describe the stage of meditation when a seeker attains the supreme goal of self-realization. Hence, again, Krishna sent the mind's initial preparation before it can be applied to meditation. An unprepared mind cannot meditate. He, therefore, gives the disciplines to prepare the mind. The foremost of all disciplines, which Krishna emphasizes throughout the Gita, lies in controlling the senses. Here, he speaks of controlling all gates. The gates refer to the 5 sense organs through which the stimuli from the external world reaches the mind. If these gates are kept wide open, the stimuli will freely enter and cause indiscriminate sensual indulgence. If, however, the gates are completely shut, sensual experiences are not possible and would result in mental frustration and suppression. Both sensual indulgence and suppression lead to mental agitations. Such a disturbed mind can never take to meditation.
So it's I think when we have to if you can mute just for a second. Thank you. So the tricky part of any spiritual evolution is the middle path. Not too much, not too little. Many people think when they embark on a spiritual path, it's totally, they go the opposite. I can't do this, I shouldn't do this, X, Y, Z. You really can't afford to get into that. It's almost denial of what you've got to do, because it'll spoil your spiritual evolution. But yet, a free hand is also not going to help you. It's very easy to indulge in things. So you have to carefully assess and channelize your efforts to that bigger goal. So you don't feel that, you might initially feel a little bit of a stretch, but you don't feel that deprivation. It's not a deprivation, it's an intelligent discipline to something higher. So you don't feel you're interested in lower value, that's all. But it can't be suppression. So very carefully, you've got to be careful about that. You've got to be disciplined about your activities. That's really it. Go ahead.
The next discipline directs the mind towards the heart. The word heart signifies the core of anything. For example, the heart of the city means the central part. The heart of problem means its nucleus. The mind runs towards the external world. An extrovert mind cannot concentrate and meditate single-pointedly. Hence, the mind must be directed towards the core of one's personality, towards the inner self. Develop introvertness. An introvert mind remains calm. It qualifies for meditation upon the self. Having prepared the senses and mind, the intellect must bring the mind to a single-pointed focus point upon Om. Om stands out as the most potent mantra, word symbol, to represent Brahman. Om has the advantage of being both articulate and intonational. Om has the advantage of being both, articulate, international. Articulate because the word Om signifies Brahman and its manifestation an appeal to the head. International in that The sound of Om produces an extraordinary effect on human beings, an appeal to the heart. Through constant and consistent meditation, the individual drops his causal subtle bodies and becomes united with the self. He attains the supreme abode of Brahman.
So there's no involvement in anything. There's a total awareness of truth. It's like your river enters the ocean. This is the meditation. You go from, you don't stop till you get there. So in actual fact, the preparation all the way along the path, you'll gain or develop what we call open eye meditation. There's an awareness of the self throughout whatever you're doing. You slowly develop that, and then you, at that stage, slowly you sit in meditation, end stage, your path. So that conditioned consciousness merges with the pure consciousness. Right now it's all conditioned, all relative. So one won't rest content till we get to that absolute state. So looking for it in the matter layers outwardly is just delaying the process. So we've got to look within. Got to go within.
So do practitioners like yourself or Swamiji spend a part of each day on single eye meditation, on meditating on Om?
So in actual fact, in our schedule at the Academy, we have a part which is like a pseudo meditation. In a sense, it's a practice. It's a practice on, in terms of all the procedure is there. And you almost chanted. And I think whatever one says about this, it won't really, I'm not sure what the curiosity is. Question. Obviously, if you reach self, you don't need to do it. But you would have done it along the way.
So being on the way, should I
way.
spend 5 minutes each day meditating upon Om?
If you feel you're at that stage where you've got very few desires, yeah, you can do that. You can do it as a practice, but it won't have any avail unless you're doing all the rest of karma bhakti jnana yoga. So many people do that. That's why I'm cautioning myself of what I answer. So if the question is, should I meditate? Not you, anybody's asking this question. The question to prefix that, am I doing karma bhakti jnana yoga? Then the question won't arise. Because when you get to a state of refinement, you won't be asking that question. It'll be a natural progression. The question should be, how many people actually get up and study this knowledge in the morning to become aware of what you've got to do? How many people do karma to refine your thoughts? If you've refined your thoughts, you won't be asking this question. Because you'll be on it. But it's just as it is a curious question. As a practice in the Academy, that's what we do. And as a practice, you might do that if you're pursuing your karma bhakti jnana yoga very smoothly. You might take quiet time to just reflect that introversion. You might take time to introspect. These are aspects of gearing your mind towards a meditative state. You'll be able to think about self in terms of your activities as a second nature thing. And then at the end stage, you may be in a position to sit. But you can't with an agitated.
My question, sorry to monopolize this a little bit, but in other spiritual practices, you wouldn't separate out Yoni Bhakta. You don't separate them out, and also you don't separate out the meditation. It's integral in what you do. So before you do something, or before or while you're speaking to someone, that's integral in how you approach that activity.
So it's not, perhaps in that case, it's not the meditation we're talking about here. This is where there's very few thoughts. There's little to non-desire. There's no desire left. There's only desire to get to self. So that desire is being talked about as here, as you have to drop even the desire to get to the self. So sound, silent, sound, silent. So they're almost just holding that last thought before your ego dissolves. I think what you might be talking about is a quiet space, quiet time, where you're just reflective. If you're talking about it in terms of meditation, no, that's not what's prescribed. Because it's not just sitting quietly. It's not something, if you've got desires, it doesn't make sense. You might sit quietly. You might meditate in the terms of the way people talk about it in this verse. But hey, if you've got so many thoughts, what are you doing? Ask yourself those questions. If you've got negative thoughts to anything, or either if you're not with that oneness, in what sense are you meditating? It's a question you should be asking. Because it's so marketed, it's very hard to distinguish, should you do that or shouldn't you do that, or that's what's called spiritual. You naturally, if you're getting everything in order of your life to do what you're supposed to do every part of your day, if that's falling in place, you may be in a position to very easily sit quietly, very easily focus on something bigger. But for how long is also a question. So that's when you've got very little desires. This is what it's talking about. It's not talking about a person who's got lots of desires trying to keep their mind quiet because they've got too many desires and it's stressing them out. It's not talking about that. Yeah. It's certainly something which is not done collectively. This meditation, which is talking about here. Going to the truth is single path. It's you, your projection. It's not a collective activity. It's not karma yoga going on, which we all got to do incidentally. So people may do all sorts of different things in different organizations or setups. There may be different things said, but you have to examine, what is this talking about? What does it mean? And then make your own assessment and decide what you want to do. I don't know, Tim, if
that helps, thank you.
Ash, something.
I was just going to add that I guess it depends on where that desire to meditate comes from. Like in the verse it says, is it coming from the mind or is it coming from the heart? If that desire to meditate comes from the heart, the thinking process, I mean, I guess it's a lot more deeper than the mind of, if I meditate, I'll have more peace, or you know, the way it's marketed.
You see, you've got to understand yourself as you evolve in your own spiritual path. There'll be certain things you're just by default no longer interested in getting involved in. It's just too distractive. So as you calm your mind, you will find yourself in different positions of where you place yourself, what your preferences are to you know, it doesn't make sense. Like, say, if you're pursuing, just as an example, exaggerated, if you're pursuing this knowledge, you can't be partying every day till 4, because you've got to get up at 4. You don't have to get up at 4. You can't wait to get up at 4. So who's going to mess that up if you really love that? So if you're partying at 4, why are you partying? It's because you feel that fulfills you. Those desires are running that way rampantly. You need to do it. You need to fulfill yourself. You feel that security in doing this, that. But there's no way you can sit that person down at 4 a.m. and to read this sort of knowledge. It's just not possible. I don't think so. You know, bring me one person, let me see that. I don't mind placing, I'm not a gambling person, let's place a bet on it. To that extreme I would go. So it doesn't, so it's a refinement, a natural progression. So one, it's your intellect averring your mind's last thought to transcend out of the remits of this world. If everything one does is in the purview of the world, that worry and anxiety, where's the thought to sit down and meditate apart from some fad which has been pushed in marketing or people have been talking about? You've got to see, what is this about? It's refinement of your desires. And it's a natural process. If somebody asks me to do something very late or go out very late, I just like, I'm feeling, how can I get rid of this person? I can't do this. I'm just looking, you know, if you're gonna do something very late, I know it's going to interrupt my morning. My morning belongs to nobody. None of you can take my morning. Some people have asked, can I have class at 6 or early? Or can we do it early at Sattvic time? I thought, you keep your Sattvic time, I'm keeping mine. I don't need the interference of anything else. So your mind is, you know, you're keeping that sacred for something, because you can't wait to keep it sacred. Why would you want to go out late? What's the interest? You go out late because you have to, because it's only to keep, you know, the karma yoga, whatever you have to do, going when there's a necessity, otherwise you just don't want to do it. But that's a natural progression. If you're a young person, you may be dying to go out late and you're thinking, why does that idiot get up at 4 o'clock in the morning? So it's natural. So you can't argue with anybody at any stage of what they do, each one, but you can gain an understanding of perhaps what this is trying to put forward and why, what's the progression. It's nobody's business really what anybody's doing, but think about it for yourself. The whole thing of this knowledge is develop your capacity to think, take it on board or reject it. Doesn't matter, but develop that steadfastness in your thinking to understand what you've got to be doing, where you go, how do you refine it to this stage? How will you get to this stage? To get to that Christ-like stage of Brahman is everybody's birthright according to the scriptures. So that's your choice. Let's go 14. Everyone okay?
अनन्यचेता सततं यो मां स्मरति नित्यसः तस्याहं सुलभः पार्थ नित्ययुक्तस्य योगिनः.
Ash, if you'd like, actually, I think it's your mic. If your mic's good, if you'd like to read. Yes.
Sorry, yes. I am easily attainable by that ever steadfast yogi whose mind constantly and continuously thinks of me without any other thought, O Bharata.
So in the translation, Ananya Cheta, with unswerving mind, it's easily attainable to one who's steadfast in yoga, that yogi. So mind is focused on no other thought but the self. But that person, it's easy. Shulabha, he says. It's interesting, as you evolve yourself, you'll see that something which you find is easy, nobody can comprehend what you're talking about. They think, what are you going on about? It's complex. So it's easy when you're steadfast in your own evolution. So it's available when your mind is steadfast in yoga. It's available, satatam nityuta, eternally uniting, when your thought is only to unite with the self, not with the preoccupation of the world. There's a consistency of unawaring a truth throughout all that one does. So it's not a mechanical repetition. It's not like constantly chanting a mantra in a practice. Sometimes you see, here, the most I've seen is when you go on a train, you see people with their mantra, like swivening their voices quietly in their mind, or their beats, or whatever. It's not that. But the personality is refined. The awareness of the thought. You're not mixing it with anything else. I'm available to that person. Satatam nitya. Always eternally awareing the self. Ananya chinta. No other thought. It doesn't say that, but it's the famous verse. No other thought but on the self. Ever steadfast. Shulabha. Available. It's available to that yogi. In the same, I was looking in my notes and I came across in the same book, it says Bahunam Janma, which means anybody. Know what that means? Vidya, what does it mean?
Across all the birds.
Many
birds.
Many birds. So it's like, it's not easy to do this. One in a generation might get this and you think, oh goodness, let's drop it. But it's actually meant to be an encouragement. So if you've got that in you, now he's saying it's easy for the person who's awareing himself. So seemingly contradictory, but it's not contradictory. If you're well prepared, you can get it. There's, I think it's, I'm not sure if it's Ramatirtha, but he puts it, it takes as much time to penetrate a rose petal, a needle to penetrate a rose petal, to get it. Otherwise, you go through, if you're not prepared, you go through many cycles of birth and death. Bahunam Janma. birth, death, continuously. Going through those vasanas, either accumulating them or trying to get rid of a few. So you better think when you leave this class, what are you actually doing with your vasanas to keep yourself aware in yourself to get to that meditation state? He says it's easy if we're focused. Let's read it. Ash.
Yeah, I was just going to say that those cycles of birth and death don't actually mean physical either. They're in this current state as well, I guess,
Yes.
because we have them consistently.
Correct. Good point.
Yeah.
So right now we're born in this class, you leave and the class dies, you're born in the next activity. The morning was born, afternoon will come, and then the morning is dead, evening comes. So if you can start to see the panoramic view of the cycles of birth and death in everything, you also understand the perspective of where you stand. It's a very short span of time that you have, in which case you must optimize the time that you have to do whatever you need in your life to optimize refinement, those vasanas. That's the opportunity you get. Everything is change, birth and death.
Yeah, in desires and emotions, even you know that come and go. Yeah.
So the more emotional, more mind-led, the more indiscriminate, the more irrational, the more emotional, the more the stress, the more the up and down, the more the change. The more you calm your mind, the more the higher value, the more the refinement, the less you get involved in the change, the more you see the purview of the whole, that changeless. And that's what we're to get onto. Let's read.
The verse further emphasizes the need for constancy in prayer. Prayer or worship has come to mean mechanical rituals forming an insignificant part of one's daily routine, a misconception affecting virtually all religious practitioners around the world. Krishna corrects this misconception by stating that prayers ought to be a full-time awareness of the Supreme Self. All actions of your body, emotions of your mind, and thoughts of your intellect must be oblated to the inner self. Your mind must constantly and continuously rest on the self, while your material equipments function in the world. By pursuing the self continually through all your activities, you will qualify as an ever steadfast yogi. No other thought should then distract your pursuit of the self. Krishna uses me to mean the self within. You must remember that you are the Supreme Self while you engage your body, mind, and intellect in their respective functions in the world. Just as an actor in a theatre remembers his true identity while performing different roles on the stage, that will make you steadfast on the path of yoga, the union with the self. The word sulabha means easily attainable. Sulabha. The general belief is that self-realization is extremely difficult to attain. The Shastras, scriptures, speak of endless lives that a seeker goes through before he attains the self. That happens when his mind remains ill-prepared and his effort improper. Herein, Krishna assures Arjuna that a seeker can easily attain enlightenment, but he must gain a perfect control over his senses and direct his mind most constantly upon the self. He then becomes the self.
So it's possible, but you've got to put in the preparation. Karma, bhakti, jnana, yoga. Got to put in the work. Wherever you are, you've got to put in the work. You better check your own karma, how you're your own intake of your reflection, the knowledge and your reflection, how you're digesting it, how you're acting on things, your relation, how you refine your emotion. Keep refining it, saying you can get to it if you prepare yourself. Just one announcement, we should put it up on our WhatsApp. Sunandaji will be doing some lectures on Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 in first week of October. We'll put it up on our WhatsApp. Also, we have 3 events going on in India. The youth camp, if anybody knows any young children meaning about 9, 10, 12 upwards to 20, early 20s. There's a youth camp and it's an absolutely brilliant experience. So if you can encourage anybody to take upon that experience, it's really worth going. I was there last year and I felt like, it was absolutely out of this world. None of the kids wanted to leave after being there in all sorts of reasons. And there's also a class member experience which is happening in January. So you can visit the academy for 5 days or more, obviously, if you'd like to stay longer, and experience the schedule there. So people from all over the world who belong to class are going to be participating in that. And you're welcome also to attend that. We'll put up that. It's also, Sam has put it all on the website. So even if you go to vedantalondon.org and go to the, is it news? News, you'll get all the events which are going on. And also one more event, there's an international retreat, which is a particular structure of events in the academy, which is in the first week of February. So I'm just letting you know so you can plan ahead if you'd like to do these things. It's worth everybody going to the academy and experiencing that, because it just elevate and escalate your own speed of evolution. Okay, hurry on. So next week we'll put it all up.